You're listening to the Monocle Daily, first broadcast on the 31st of October 2025 on Monocle Radio.
Brazil struggles to understand how its police could have killed 132 people. America's favourite pastime acquires international resonance. And do you enjoy a pumpkin spice latte, or are you actually fundamentally sane? I'm Andrew Muller. The Monocle Daily starts now. Hello and welcome to the Monocle Daily, coming to you from our studios here at Midori House in London. I'm Andrew Muller. My guests Antonio Sampaio, Chris Chermak, Fernando Augusto Pacheco and Monica Lillis will discuss the day's stuff. We'll hear about Monocle's new collaboration with Burberry, and we'll have our weekly wrap-up of what we've learned. Stay tuned, all that and more coming up right here on the Monocle Daily. This is the Monocle Daily. I'm Andrew Muller, and we start in Rio de Janeiro, still counting the cost of a police raid on two favelas in the city's north earlier this week. At least 132 people are now known to have been killed. Among the many who have expressed their bewilderment is Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Police have claimed that they were confronted by organised and well-armed criminals who attacked them with drone-borne explosives, among other weapons. Well, I'm joined now by Antonio Sampaio, expert on Latin American politics and security. Antonio, do we have a clear understanding of what actually happened when the police went into these two favelas?
Yes, we do according to the police, but a lot of information is also coming out gradually from the communities themselves, which have a slightly different story. Of course, the police saying that they went in to arrest or kill several high-level members of the Red Command criminal group, which is the largest criminal drug trafficking organization in Rio. And one of them being the head of the Red Command in that area, nicknamed Doca, who remains, free. He was not killed or arrested in that. But the police used, as usual, a highly, securitized, highly militarized tactics that involved expelling or entering the favela with police officers and pushing the suspected drug traffickers into a nearby wooded area where other military police officers were waiting to ambush them. So you can see that the tactics used were quite, warlike. They were not the type of action that police usually does. It's more like a war situation. So the community understandably has reacted with tremendous shock to that operation, the number of bodies that they had to recover and line up on the streets. And it's the deadliest police operation ever in Rio de Janeiro, which is saying a lot given the track record of, militarized and repressive police tactics there.
I mean, you're correct to point out that violent confrontations between police and gangs in the favelas are not that unusual, but do we understand why this one escalated like it did? We are assuming the police did not intend to go in and kill dozens of people.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of things that remain to be explained about this operation, and it's not at all clear to me yet if the police indeed had at any point an idea of doing this operation smoothly or with less, with a smaller death toll. I think the reason why they decided to escalate this operation so much and to create this sort of ambush in the woods against the drug traffickers, expecting really to kill them because there's no other explanation for an ambush, is the fact that they were trying to arrest or kill the leader of the Red Command there, which is nicknamed Doca, who is a very long-standing figure in the Red Command. He was not, however, killed or arrested and remains at large. So in that sense, the operation is, didn't go according to plan for them, but it's not at all clear to me that they expected a smaller death toll, or I think they're just becoming bolder. And actually, some of the senior police officers there cited the example of El Salvador, where the government adopted a highly repressive prison-based sort of incarcerating large amounts of people, some without due process, as a tactic to fight gangs. And I think that Brazilian authorities are looking at that and thinking maybe we can do that here and becoming bolder in their approach because of that.
The state governor, Claudio Castro, ordered this raid. He has praised it, so he doesn't appear to think the police did anything wrong. Is it possible to get a sense of how many Brazilians are likely to agree with him? Is he gambling that there is actually quite a lot of popular support for taking measures like this?
Yes, he is right that there is quite a lot of popular support, and public security policies in Brazil have become, I'm afraid, as most issues today in the world, have become highly polarized according to right or left political ideologies. And there's definitely support for the operation, a lot of popular support, especially from those leaning towards the right. A lot of politicians in the National Congress and state governors have voiced publicly support for the operation and said that it was a cleanup, that all of the dead were drug traffickers, they were bandits. And that the only, they expect Lula to voice his surprise because he's always been lax and soft against drug traffickers and security, or so goes the argument in among the right-leaning politicians and governors. And in fact, a group of governors of other states that align with the right wing and are supporters of Bolsonaro and Jair Bolsonaro, former president, they went to Rio de Janeiro this week after the operation to voice their support in person to the governor, and obviously also hoping to have a photo opportunity with him, signaling that this line of tough against crime and highly militarized operation, lethal persecution of criminals, tends to become a very important flag for the Brazilian right in the months and years to come. And remembering that next year is an election, a presidential election in Brazil.
Antonio Sampaio, thank you for joining us. You're listening to The Daily on Monocle Radio. This is The Daily on Monocle Radio. Now, if you purchase a cup of coffee from Monocle's Cafe on Chiltern Street here in London, or in Monocle's cafes in Paris or Tokyo roundabout now, and why would you not, you will notice something slightly different about the cups. They commemorate a new collaboration between Monocle and Burberry, and here with more on that is Monocle's publisher, Luc Courtier. Luc, welcome to The Daily.
Thanks, Andrew.
It's not just the cups, is it?
Weirdly, it's not just the cups. we built a slightly larger world. We started with, we had a bit of fun working with Burberry. We started in print. We started with this kind of cool illustrative take on archetypes or characters you find in London, wearing Burberry items illustrated by our art team. And then from that, we built out cafe and shop takeovers in London, Paris and Tokyo, which all went live on Monday. And they include said cup, they include artwork running through the stores, vinyls, menus. They even include us stocking some Burberry items in our shop with those characters on the labels that match those items.
Tell us a bit about how a collaboration like this comes about. What gets talked about when a brand wants to welcome Monocle into its world, or vice versa?
I think there are probably two things. I think one, I suppose, particularly with Burberry, they had a take on Britishness that they wanted to start playing more with, that was about a wit and a humour, and I think this sort of lightness of touch. And they came to us to say they wanted to look at London, but they wanted to do it in a way that felt kind of original, kind of different. And they knew that we have an audience that we talk to that is their target, but they kind of trust us to use the creativity that we have to take Burberry, filter it or refract it through Monocle's lens to talk best to that audience. So it's about a meeting of minds between their brand and our brand and what they're trying to do and the way in which we talk through text, through imagery, through illustration to the audience that we know in the voice that they trust.
Is it not, just asking generally, not about this particular collaboration, because I'm curious, is it ever difficult to persuade a brand, especially one like Burberry, which obviously takes its brand very seriously, to relinquish that amount, to, I guess, place that amount of trust in Monocle?
I mean, yes. Yes, I think it is. I think it comes to playing with the tenets of brand and where rigidity and repetition are very important in vision and identity, but also where are those moments of flex and surprise? I think particularly in fashion and some of the work we do in the luxury space, I think with Burberry we sort of saw them starting to play with both, especially when Josh Schulman took over as CEO and Jonathan Keeman came in as CMO. There started to be this new vision that was an interesting mix of where those areas were where they could, I don't want to say be a bit looser, but they could play outside some of the sort of brand tenets, as it were. So yes, I think it's tricky. I think we've been doing what we do for a long time. So I think there is a sense if you're going to do something creative that's a bit beyond what a standard, content commercial partnership might be, we would be the ones to do it. But yeah, it is a point of tension, which, I mean, not that there's ever any tension in anything we do.
Obviously not. But if we bring it back again to this particular collaboration, are there any particular aspects of it that you were especially pleased with or came up even better than you thought they might?
I think that the quality of the illustration is so good. And I think that they went with us in terms of, like, we have the retired socialite as this rather elegant, illustrated Chelseaite lady who sort of...
I did see some of these illustrations in the cafe on Chiltern Street earlier.
Correct. The Heath Rambler. There are so many, I think that there is a beauty in not always trying to over-explain a brand. And I think this came out so well. And I think... sometimes in illustration, there's just this lightness of touch and there's this lyricism that you can't find anywhere else. And I think it's quite interesting for a brand like Burberry to have come to us and said, yes, there's product involved, but we can lean on something that's fundamentally more emotional. And just the print piece is beautiful. It's just good print, well done. And I think you see it in the November issue. Well done to them because they work with us in a way the issue pretty much falls open onto that piece. But that was great. And then I think it was cool for us to activate London, Paris and Tokyo at the same time on Monday, which also was not a stressful thing to do at all. So there were lovely moments of surprise. And I think it was interesting being in Milan and talking to other brands who were sort of said, well, why didn't you, well, how do we do that? So that was fun as well.
Luc Courtier, thanks for joining us. You're listening to The Daily. This is The Daily on Monocle Radio. Major League Baseball's World Series is often mocked outside the United States for the apparent hubris of its name. This year's World Series, however, is an international event, pitting the Toronto Blue Jays against the Los Angeles Dodgers, and given the grand scheme of US-Canada relations, it is something of a grudge match. Despite the astonishing heroics of Dodgers superstar Shohei Ohtani, the Blue Jays have a 3-2 lead in the series and can wrap it up in front of a home crowd later tonight. Well, I'm joined now by Monocle's senior news editor and America's favourite pastime desk chief, Chris Chermak. For Canadians, there is a lot on this because they thought they were going to get their revenge earlier this year, Chris, in the Stanley Cup, the ice hockey, but they did not because the Florida Panthers knocked over the Edmonton Oilers. So
Yes.
Has this become seen in Canada as US versus Canada?
This has absolutely
scene in Canada as US versus Canada. Maybe predictably, just like in politics, Americans care less. Canadians care a huge amount at this point about how this is potentially going to go. Just watching all the scenes, like even when Toronto plays in Los Angeles, because they've flipped. Sometimes they play in Los Angeles, sometimes in Toronto. The stadium in Toronto has been showing the games, the Rogers Centre, and is absolutely packed with mad Canadians who are really going for this. So it is just interesting to see how a country has come together. Also, unlike the Stanley Cup, Toronto is the only Canadian baseball team in the league. So everyone in Canada is rallying around this in this moment of such, tense Canadian-American relations. And that's, of course, what brings it home even more than in February as well.
So have usual internecine hostilities within Canada been suspended? Is everybody grudgingly deciding we are all Torontonians this week?
They are absolutely deciding that they're all Torontonians, even the Americans there, and that's what I find fascinating, I have to say, because it's been interesting reading some of the quotes, like the sports, obviously the Stars don't really want to get into politics. That's not what they're there for. They're here to play the game. But Toronto's manager is an American, John Schneider. He's born in New Jersey, but even he had to sort of admit coming ahead of this that he feels more Canadian than American right now. He said it's such a fulfilling job, an entire country hanging on every pitch. I feel like I'm more Canadian. I love drinking beer. I like drinking Tim Hortons. I'm one of them. So you've had these, and even another star that I'll just mention, George Springer, said, I'm so happy for our team, our fans, our city, our country. The guy's from Connecticut.
How subtle or otherwise have Canadian politicians been about clambering aboard the bandwagon?
Well, this is what's interesting too, because until today or the last couple of days, Canadian politicians were not really jumping on the bandwagon, at least of the politics of it. Obviously, they're supporting the team. But what prompted me to come on this show was it's fascinating that even now Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, he of the Reagan tariff ad fame that torpedoed the tariff negotiations between Canada and the US, wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post comparing the World Series with what's happening in US-Canadian politics, talking about how Canada is always underestimated and sort of linking it in that way. And he is right that also in the sense that the Dodgers are the big team, Los Angeles, with all the money, all the superstars, Shohei Ohtani, as you mentioned as well. It's sort of been pitched as this David versus Goliath thing. And he really leans into that, saying, the Blue Jays are now up to 3-2. Even if it's a David versus Goliath, this is never the case. Americans are underestimating the Jays. Canada's team isn't some small market afterthought, just like the country is. So it's interesting how everyone has leaned into the politics of this to make clear, no, we are not just your northern neighbor that you can forget about. We can win things. We can be better than you.
Is there a potential difficulty here for the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney? Obviously, we assume he is all aboard for the Blue Jays and hopes they win it tonight, or indeed hopes they win it eventually. They don't have to win tonight's game. They do have, a bit of room to manoeuvre still. But if Canada does win this, by which I mean if the Blue Jays win this, there is going to be an amount of Canadian triumphalism beyond anything he might be able to control. That's not likely to go over tremendously well south of the border. I mean, does he just decide, look, the Americans are going to be unhappy about this anyway, I might as well just pile in on it for the whatever domestic political credit is there to be gained, or do I have to be a little bit gracious in victory, should indeed victory be what occurs?
It's a good question. I mean, this brings us back to this Ronald Reagan ad. I mean, the kind of things that can irk Donald Trump. We just never know what that might be. The fact that simply an ad would end up torpedoing the trade talks between Canada and the US. So in that sense, maybe there's a risk. But I think given he is the leader of Canada, if Toronto actually wins this thing, he'd probably run the risk, a greater risk, of losing the next election if he did not lean into the fact that Canada was the superstars winners of the World Series going forward. So I think he's going to have to. There's obviously going to be a parade in Toronto, which you would expect the whole of Canada to be invited to.
And so the thing for him to do is just to turn up at the next trade negotiations wearing a Blue Jays cap.
Absolutely wear a Blue Jays cap. Why not?
Chris Chermak, Monocle's senior news editor, thank you for joining us. You're listening to The Daily. You're listening to The Daily with me, Andrew Muller. I am joined now by Monocle's senior correspondent, Fernando Augusto Pacheco, and Monocle's associate producer, Monica Lillis. And we'll start with a look at the Billboard charts, specifically at what isn't in the Billboard charts. For the first time since 1990, there is not one track in the top 40 which could be characterised as rap or hip-hop. Granted that there is less room in the top 40 than usual, with fully 12 places occupied by Taylor Swift. But still, Monica, I have to ask you first, because your other job title here, beyond associate producer, is Taylor Swift desk chief here at Monocle Radio. Is this all Taylor Swift's fault?
I suppose in a way it kind of is her fault, because she is occupying over a quarter of the places, because she released her new album earlier this month. And I guess she's just really, really popular and people are streaming her music a lot. But I guess the Billboard, the US charts is quite... I don't know if peculiar is the right word. Fernando probably knows more about this than me. But it's based solely on popularity as opposed to in the UK, where there's a kind of a cap on how many songs can go in the chart from one album. So if an album is really, really popular and people are streaming it front to back, all those songs will end up in the top 40 or the top 10 or whatever.
So that being the case, Fernando, is it possible that reports or inferences of the death of rap and or hip-hop have been greatly exaggerated?
Oh, of course, they've been greatly exaggerated. Having said that, I mean, we also have a scheduling problem here, because I think the top two hip-hop artists, at least in the US, when it comes to sales and streaming, I think they're a bit of in a low at the moment, especially Drake. There haven't been, at least a current release, Kendrick Lamar as well. There's been some album releases like Cardi B, but I don't think the album sold as many copies as she was thinking it would as well. And it's interesting, Andrew, because only 5 years ago, I think rap was at its peak in the charts. I think 30% of the whole American music market was rap. Now, I think it's around 23% or something like that. So maybe it's not at its peak, and pop is having its moment. We must talk about that. So I don't think that rap is going through a bad time. I think it's because pop is at its peak, and it's a different type of pop. I mean, it's the pop that Taylor Swift does. It's a more gentle, we have Olivia Dean in the charts, we have Benson Boone, we have Alex Warren. It's not a very electrifying
it's not the pop that you like.
It's not the pop I like. I mean, sorry, I was trying my best to say something. It's this genteel pop that's dominating the charts in the United States at the moment.
I mean, do you see, from your vantage point, Monica, on the Taylor Swift desk, the influence spreading? Are we starting to get noticeable amounts of popular artists who've become popular by trying to sound as much like Taylor Swift as they can possibly get away with?
I do think people do emulate her sound, yes. So if you think about people, I guess, just off the top of my head, Sabrina Carpenter, Olivia Rodrigo, two artists that have dominated charts in the last year or so. They see her, Gracie Abrams, they see her as this storytelling genius. And they do kind of try and emulate her sound as much as possible. But they do have their own twists on things. But I think it's maybe just the case of tastes are just changing. And rap, Elliot, our studio manager, made a really good point earlier that it doesn't mean that rap isn't popular anymore. It just means that it's not necessarily mainstream in the same way that it is. But that's kind of, me and Faye also were talking about this earlier. It's, the US, when it comes to music, isn't the be all and end all, as we know. And in the UK, Dave, one of the UK's biggest rappers, released a new album last week, and I believe that 3 of his singles are in the top 40 in the UK. So it's still popular over here. It's kind of having a lot. I always talk about rap music, and I guess we can verge into hip hop music a little bit too. About my uni years, sort of 2016, 2017, everything in the club was hip hop and rap. It was really, really popular. It's just having a bit of a lull at the moment, I think.
Well, on the subject of things changing, we shall turn now to London, where, as residents or recent visitors will have noticed, its nightlife is other than what it was. Many may be familiar with the weary trudge involved in attempting to find anything to eat or drink after about 10 p.m. One chain of eateries has had an idea, which we will come to, Fernando. But first of all, as listeners may be aware, you are ideally placed to assess the scale of the change because you actually live, for reasons surpassing my understanding, in the heart of London's nightlife in Soho. Is it noticeably quieter now than it was when you first moved there?
Listen, I got to be very honest. I've been depressed for a bit, about the lack of options for late night dining here in London. It's been quite sad, it's a wonderful big city, buzzing until 8 p.m. But I genuinely think things are changing slowly. I can feel it in the air. We will discuss this as well because I am a late night diner. And I was in New York. I just came back from New York in the weekend, and I booked myself a La Tête d'Or at 10 p.m. And I told my New York friends, and they were like, Fernando, are you crazy? There'll be no one in the restaurant, because even in New York, it's not that buzzing as it used to be. But you know what? I had a great time. I think 10 p.m. is a perfectly reasonable time to go and have dinner. And I had time to have a drink with a friend at 6, another one at 8, and then have my dinner at 10.
I did actually, in fairness to London, Monica, as recently as last night, manage to find somewhere that was open relatively late for a drink. I was sceptical when my friend I was with announced that we were embarking on this ambition, not least as he was not even from London, but visiting from overseas. But there it was. It was open, and it actually verged on the pleasant. But is this something you've noticed as well as the resident young person at the table?
Yes, and I do think that I am the reason it's going downhill.
This is all personally your fault.
It's all my fault. It's my generation's fault because I just love...
No, I like the narrative that it's somehow all personally just your fault, not that of your generation. London, we've found a scapegoat.
We've found the culprit. It's Monica Lillis. No, but I do really like just going out after work, maybe on a Friday night, grabbing a drink, having not necessarily an early dinner, maybe like 7, 8 p.m, and then being home by 11:30, going to bed at midnight and getting, I don't really get up that early. I don't know why I'm spreading propaganda, but getting up relatively early and not feeling really hungover the next day.
Serious question, because this is a thought that people have raised, and certainly it's something I hear a lot of. Is it the fact that it is just too expensive? That you don't need to think back all that far to be able to recall when 20 or 30 quid was actually quite a decent night out, whereas now it's barely a round of drinks.
Yeah, no, it is really expensive. And dining out is brutal. So drinks are expensive enough as they are, and then food on top of that. So it's kind of, I suppose, me and my partner, we do a toss-up. We either go out for a drink or we go out for dinner, and we don't usually do both. So that's possibly one of the reasons. Because
I have myself, Fernando, as someone who likes to go out for something to eat and something to drink, but you can only do so much of realising I've spent actually quite a lot of money on something that wasn't really all that good. So we turn now to what Caffè Murano is doing to try and solve this problem. What is it, and is it going to work?
I think it's going to work. Caffè Murano, which I love, and they recently opened one right in front of the office, so we can even go there later. So basically, after 9 p.m., Monday to Saturday, there's a different pricing for some of the meals. I think you can get any bowl of pasta in the menu for £15, and a drink as well, which includes a martini and a glass of wine for £5. I think that's very reasonable pricing.
So £20 for a late night snack, that's not actually too bad.
At Caffè Murano we're talking about as well. And there's another example I can give you to you, which I've been recently, which is the Park, the new Jeremy King's restaurant, close to Queensway. There will be a discount in your bill, I think, of about 20 to 25% if you book after 9 p.m. as well. Okay. So I feel it's a bit of a movement there happening, and I'm so happy because, they're giving basically incentives for people to eat out late. And I'm happy to say I have a dinner booked at 8:45, Hammersmith at the River Cafe. They're not giving the discounts though. I wish they would.
You know what though? I'm really glad this is happening, late night dining on one level, because especially when I go to the theatre in central London, there's nothing I despise more than a pre-theatre menu restaurant. Like it really stresses me out. There's so many
rushed.
people. It's so rushed. The food's probably cold. Not going to name any names, but at least now if the theatre finishes at 9:30, I can just check my watch and say, okay, I'm going to go to Caffè Murano in St James's and go for my £15 bowl of pasta. And I'm not being funny. Any other options, sort of fast food adjacent, they're going to cost you about £15 anyway.
15 quid barely gets you out of Chipotle.
Yeah,
Genuinely.
exactly. So hopefully other places do pick up on this trend. People want to eat good food.
I'm the eternal optimist. I'm quite happy with the new developments.
Yeah.
Well, this being All Hallows Eve, time to consider another American import arguably even more annoying than the obligation to trudge back and forth from your front door buying off children draped in theatrical cobwebs with handfuls of confectionery. The pumpkin spice latte, which, it says here in the New York Times, apparently divides opinion in Europe, and indeed it should, those opinions being terrible and revolting. Fernando, by way of research, and actually we should note, listeners, that Fernando is wearing a distinctly pumpkin spice latte shaded shirt. You're missing this, but you're just going to have to take our word for it. You went out and bought one, Fernando?
I did, and to be fair, it was kind of a slightly different one because it was iced and with oat milk. But
Sorry, without milk or with oat milk?
Oat milk.
Okay, actually either of those sounds as...
It wouldn't be a latte without milk.
Listen, I never try.
No one likes a pedant, Monica, as I have learned from living my life.
I was curious because I'm pro pumpkin. I love pumpkin.
You're pro pumpkin.
Love pumpkin soup.
Again, is this
pumpkin
what
pie.
is expressed by the shirt?
Exactly. I do like the color orange, but I have to say, my God, it's overrated, that drink. And the problem is when I was drinking, it was fine. It's very mild taste. I like the cinnamon touches to it. That was the highlight. But the aftertaste was quite bad, actually. I'm not actually feeling that well after having my first pumpkin spice latte, you know? My God, the amount of sugar there. I don't know how people can drink that every single day.
Counterpoint, Monica.
I'm scared.
The pumpkin spice latte is not overrated. As Fernando said, it is disgusting.
I really like a pumpkin spice latte.
But you're wrong. You're outvoted.
Okay, but I do. I'm an advocate. I like it. I like the cinnamon notes. I like the comforting flavours of autumn and, you know, it's leaning onto the Christmassy side. I like it. I find it soothing.
We may, Fernando, be at some sort of genetic disadvantage, apparently, when it comes to appreciating the pumpkin spice latte, because it says here in the New York Times, writing about European culinary habits, and we know, of course, that everything the New York Times writes about European habits is absolutely correct and never, ever, ever wrong. But they say that there is a north-south divide, which is that the people sort of Belgium, Germany and upwards all aboard for the pumpkin spice latte, whereas people in Italy, Spain, Greece, etc. are less convinced.
Of course, we are...
And we are even more southern than they are.
It makes sense, I suppose, in terms of like culinary taste generally. And I've written in my notes, Italians are stubborn because they're not going to change their espresso for anyone, are they?
This is
Let's
so
be honest.
good.
It is what it is. It's
all our
perfect
Italian listeners address your complaints to Monocle personally, not Monocle as an institution.
Can I add an extra rant here? Because
Please.
I haven't been to Starbucks for 5 years. I don't know. I mean,
you won't be going back after
it's
this.
so bare inside, because I remember my early days at Starbucks. It used to be quite cozy, you know, a lot of kind of browns and greens. Now it's just kind of white. It looks like I'm going to a hospital. So if the CEO of Starbucks is
Well, if
listening
what you're
to
saying
this,
is true, you might be going to one later anyway.
Exactly. So if the CEO is listening, please change the
Well,
decor.
just finally then, it is, of course, Halloween. I do have to ask, what are you both planning to dress up as later? Monica, you first. Upstairs, is there a pointy hat and a broom you're going to...
That's just my everyday job anyway, isn't it?
I was waiting for you to say, that's how I got here, etc.
I'm going to whack on some devil horns and red lipstick, go out with my sister, drink a ghoulish martini, I don't know.
Fernando, you already have your devil horns on, but again, it's Friday. Are you planning to go beyond that for Halloween?
To be fair, I'm quite basic, and I do like a sexy Halloween costume. But I think as a Fernando, I would do.
Fernando, please tell us, when you think of a sexy Halloween costume, what are you thinking of?
Either Indiana Jones or Che Guevara. One of those.
Outstanding. Just
Yes.
every day, Fernando, is an education. Monocle's senior correspondent, Fernando Augusto Pacheco, and Monocle's associate producer, Monica Lillis, who I think we have now broken. Thank you both for joining us. Finally, on today's show, it's our weekly attempt to calculate what the last 7 days have taught us.
You're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
We learned this week that the extremely former UK Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn is to star in a pantomime.
Oh, no, he isn't.
Oh, yes, he is. Or, to be clear, for the benefit of listeners who may have been following the somewhat slapstick birthing spasms of Corbyn's putative new political party, another pantomime. We learned that Corbyn had agreed to an on-screen cameo in some ghastly-sounding production in a small theatre in his North London constituency, in which he will appear as the Wizard of Oslington.
Oh, no.
We did not learn, however, and remain mystified by the decision of producers to cast Corbyn as any variation of the Wizard of Oz. After all, one is famous as a vainglorious charlatan who encouraged a cast of picturesque naifs to undertake a bewildering journey on the ultimately empty promise that he could solve all their problems with a variety of nebulous magic. And the other first appeared in a novel published by L. Frank Baum in 1900, later adapted into a popular MGM musical starring Judy Garland. Look, we checked, right? And all the widow tanky jokes had been done, and at any rate we would have then had to do a whole thing for international listeners about how tanky is a colloquial term for obdurate Stalinist, and widow twanky is a character in the popular pantomime Aladdin, so actually widow tanky is genuinely very witty. Well done to everyone who got there before we did. But we learned that Corbyn was not the only Labour Party leader, past or present, UK or elsewhere, having an arguably awkward interaction with popular culture. And we also learned that fat-headed culture war bun fights over nothing whatsoever are not an exclusively American province.
Arriving back in Australia from his overseas trip, the Prime Minister stepped off the plane proudly wearing a T-shirt with the name of a band, Joy Division.
We learned, yes, that Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese had descended the stairs of his official aircraft wearing a Joy Division T-shirt, and that Australians were up in arms. Let's have a sound effect of an up in arms Australian.
Struth.
We learned upon further frankly reluctant investigation that the upness in arms,
Struth,
being encouraged by Australian opposition leader Susan Ley, was not over the Prime Minister's taste in music as such, as indeed Joy Division made many fine records, as all discerning persons agree. Or even over the propriety of 60-something men, never mind prime actual ministers wearing band T-shirts in public, but over the admittedly unsavoury etymology of Joy Division's name.
The name was taken from the wing of a Nazi concentration camp.
We did not learn from this, obviously, that Albanese endorses the policies and or sentiments to which Susan Ley alluded, because he doesn't, but we did learn that Albanese was big enough not to note that Susan Ley chose to put that double S in her name during her own teenage punk years, just saying etc., or that she once drove a Volkswagen. We learned anyway, and at least, that not even all of Sue SS and Ley's coalition partners were willing to go along with this twaddle.
There's a lot to legitimately criticise the Prime Minister about. $1 trillion debt, skyrocketing house prices and job losses in our heavy industrial sector. Wearing a T-shirt isn't one of them. I'm part of the troubled and forgotten X-generation that came of age listening and dancing to Joy Division and New Order.
So we learned of Ley's attempts to weaponise Joy Division, and we worked on this upcoming bit for some time, pay attention, that far from creating a hostile atmosphere for the Prime Minister with her transmission, she has merely caused her own colleagues to wonder if she's lost control. And at least Albanese didn't get off the plane in Washington in a dead Kennedy's top. And on the subject of national leaders leaving Washington, D.C. on official aircraft, we learned as US President Donald Trump embarked on a tour of Asia that Earth's most powerful individual, the man upon whose whim human civilization lives from one minute to the next, is capable of telling the difference between certain large wild animals. So that was something.
They're really aptitude tests, I guess, in a certain way, but they're cognitive tests. Let AOC go against Trump. let Jasmine go against Trump. I don't think Jasmine, the first couple of questions are easy, a tiger, an elephant, a giraffe, you know. When you get up to about 5 or 6, and then when you get up to 10 and 20 and 25, they couldn't come close to answering any of those questions.
Although we learned from which that someone in the circle of the President of the United States appears to think it useful that he at least semi-regularly takes the Montreal Cognitive Assessment Test, which is used to identify symptoms of dementia. Although we're sure, reviewing his appearances on his Asian tour, there's absolutely nothing to worry about on that front.
Now known as the Gulf of America. Isn't it nice? They say it now routinely. I heard the news today. The Gulf of America weather is wonderful. They don't say it with a smile. It's called the Gulf of America. How did that happen, right?
We further learned that his plans for re-establishing US hegemon in the Caribbean, and we will further concede, having been beaten to all the Donroe Doctrine zingers, well done everybody, may not have ended there.
The US Department of Defense announced it was moving the US Gerald Ford aircraft carrier and its strike group from the Mediterranean to the Caribbean to add even more firepower to the situation.
We learned that, yes, some old-fashioned gunboat diplomacy is being brought to bear upon a particular Latin American capital.
Caracas?
It does seem at best an eccentric undertaking, yes. For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Muller. And that is all for this edition of the Monocle Daily. It being October 31st, please enjoy our hilarious Halloween-themed credits. A big thanks to our panellists today, Antonio Vampio, Monica Lillis, Spook Courtier, Antichrist Chermak, and Fernando or Ghost O Pacheco. Today's show was produced by Monica Lillis and researched by Croana Moser. Our sound engineer was Elliot Greenfield, with editing assistance from Murray Heller Bouvan. I'm Andrew Murderer here in London. The Daily is back at the same time on Monday. Thanks for listening.